campaign digital. And almost all of the presenters actually highlighted capacity as an important challenge and also as an important aspect of their work. And this morning, we had an opportunity to familiarize ourselves with some of the world-class digitalization tools that we have for health campaigns. And all the presenters, one way or another, emphasized proper training and sustainable capacity development as an integral part of the rollout of those tools. So as we all agree, capacity building is much more than training, and it requires an institutionalized mechanism where dedicated and trained staff, elaborate processes, and tools are in place and functioning. We have two presenters in this session. We are happy to have these two presenters, and they are happy to share some of their successes, challenges, and lessons learned from the field. And so our two speakers are Pradita Kundu from eGov and Andrew Kisia from HISP Kenya. So our first speaker would be Pradita, and Pradita, please, the floor is yours.
Yeah, it's always a me over the last 20 years of working with governments and with the private sector on building capacity so that governments can, uh, you know, do digital transformation for its citizens. So this slide you would have seen, I think, a few times maybe. Actually build capacity. And that capacity building comes in the form of building the capacity of the state to run digital transformation programs and the capacity of the markets to take the products, the tools, the platforms, and to implement them. We work across multiple SDGs, health, sanitation, urban governance, etc. We didn't always start this way. 20 years ago, we were actually working with local governments and building point solutions for them. We were trying to implement them. And what we realized is that, we're not a large organization, right? We're about 150 people. And we realized that if we had to really sort of have impact, that the platforms really had to work across the country in multiple states. We have about more than, uh, right now our platform is in more than 4,000 cities in India. So if we had to really scale this out, this wasn't going to be the way we were, that was going to happen. So in 2014, we open sourced all of our software. That did not work. I mean, yeah, we thought that if we open sourced it, other people would take it, use it, build on it, you know, that would give us impact. But that didn't work very well either. So what we started doing was the real game changer came in 2019 when we started our work on actually building the capacity. And that's sort of the journey that I'll take you through today. So from 2019, since we started working on capacity building of the private sector and the government in India, we have seen the platform being used in over around, I mean, this is slightly old data, but now we are in about 4,000 cities, city governments in India are using our platform. So instead of me telling this story, I want to just first share a video of uh, a state in India where we worked with very closely and where we build the state capacity. So we're going to hear from the senior bureaucrat of that state.
చూడండి చెత్త చెదారం ఎట్లా ఉన్నాయో రోడ్లు మొత్తం ఇది చేసుకుంటా ఈగలు దోమలు ఇది చేసుకుంటా ఎవరి కాళ్ళు శుభ్రత పాటించుకుంటా ఇది చేసుకుంటా ఉంటే చాలా బాగుంటుంది.
This Puraseva mobile application, which has been developed with the e-government foundation, is indeed a powerful tool in the hands of citizens, because that's one platform wherein all kinds of services are made possible, and in the whole process citizens have been thoroughly empowered.
Since 2010, we were looking for the solutions which could provide better citizen services. But during the discussions, we talked and we came to this thing that e-governance would help Punjab in implementing this project, and they would not charge anything. Their past experience with other governments and the quality of the work, I got that confidence that they can do it. You needed a system which is quite efficient, cost effective, and also we wanted to partner with an organization which could build our capacity. It was very nice to see that eGov is not interested in sticking to your state. It's more like they want to build your capacity and then to move on.
One of the biggest challenges IS officers have is how their system is performing and who's responsible. Dashboards is one way of describing what we do. So I can say, oh, there are these 3 wards which don't seem to have a good performance. And then I can actually see within the ward how the individuals are performing.
We have put all our products in open source. It's absolutely free of charge. Cities and states can download and use it themselves, or they can seek our assistance and we'll help them. We're also trying to work with partners, systems integrators, large SIs, it could be like the TCS and Wipros of the world or IBM or whatever. They can also implement our modules in the various cities. We will train them, we will help them.
eGov also helps government officials so that they do not get left behind in the digital era.
यहाँ पे पहले आते थे, पहले मैनुअल फॉर्म भरना पड़ता था, उसके बाद मैनुअल जीएट भरनी पड़ती थी. एक कस्टमर को जो है बेनिफिशियरी को 10 मिनट लगते थे. अच्छा, अभी यहाँ पे 2 मिनट लग जाते हैं. 2 मिनट में हो जाता है. 2 मिनट में हो जाता है.
We are not interested in sticking around. We want to build the capacity and move out. That is who we are. Now, how did we get there? We didn't get to this state where, Mr. Ajay is talking about, how we come out of that state. So what is the goal of capacity building? We want to make sure that the strategy that you have, the digital health strategy that the country or the state has, you are able to operationalize it. So where we help in setting up the programs. What kind of teams are you going to require? How are you going to, what is the governance mechanism? We saw some presentations yesterday as well on steering committees that needs to be set up and the other roles that are required to make sure that a country can take on this digital transformation journey. We also look at what skills are there within the country, regionally, within the government itself, and what kind of skills you need to add to make this successful. And how do you make this transition, right? Digital transformation is not just about moving from paper to a digital system. All of us have had that experience, but it's much more than that. So how do we look at this transformation journey? So we have learned that digital transformation or capacity building has key 4 elements. One is the strategy, right? The first and foremost thing is the country's, in this case, the digital health strategy, right? What do you want to use? How are you thinking of, digitally enabling your teams? What are they going to? How does that improve the overall well-being of the citizens? What are the data security policies? We talked about a lot of discussions around data security, privacy. What are those policies? Does the country have any? If not, how would you go about building those policies and frameworks? And what are the institutions that exist, or what are the institutions that needs to be built, or what are the institutions that needs to be whose capacity needs to be enhanced so that they can take on this audacious task? Secondly, then we look at within those institutions, how do they go about, building out the roadmap for this transformation? Third, and more importantly, and I know a lot of you are interested on this, is how do we build the technical capacity of the teams? And hopefully, when all of these 3 things are in place, then the teams, the countries can start to innovate on their own, right? New things happen that nobody ever thought about. So this is a story of a state which is almost the size of Ghana, just for comparison, but very limited resources, both in terms of human and the IT skills. This is actually the state, the government itself. And this is the story of how we enable them, and now today, after about 3 years, they are winning projects on digital transformation. This is the state IT team that we enabled. So let's look at first, they actually had some level of strategy in place. So we looked at first going into what would it take to be ready to start the journey. This is a sort of a plan. We worked with them. We sat down with the leadership of this government. We looked at what is their vision. We looked at what is their procurement strategy. And if these things did not exist, we helped them create it. We facilitated those conversations and we helped them create it. Is there a leader who's going to run this program, right? We also looked at governance. We looked at, okay, now you're embarking on this journey. What are the timelines? How are you going to execute it? What are the milestones, etc.? How is this program going to be launched? Who's going to be hired? What are the skills that exist in-house? Who needs to be hired? How do you even hire those people? What are the requirements that are you going to put out? How will you evaluate the vendor, etc.? And then once the tech implementation partner is on board, when the internal teams have been identified, that's when we go about doing the actual implementation capacity building. here's a typical example of the governance that we set up in the state. So the state had a steering group. There was a program management unit that was running the program for them, that was responsible to the steering group. There were advisory groups created that would inform both the program management, the technology, and also on the domain, because they were rolling out this system for, property tax in all the cities in that state. So how do you calculate property tax, etc.? That was the domain advisory group that was providing those inputs. And then, of course, there was the technology partner and this was comprised of members from within the government and also, firms that were identified wherever the the government decided that they wanted to bring in external expertise. And once this was done, which was about, a couple of months of work, we went on to looking at technical skills building. Now, when you're looking at setting up a digitally capable organization, you're looking at three things. You're looking at resources, which is team, skills, how are you going to hire them, what are the software, hardware, and also most importantly, where are the budgets going to come from, right? You're looking at how are you going to allocate work to them, right? There is also the whole the project or program management. What is urgent? What needs to be done now? What are the milestones? Managing all of that. So this is something that we help them define in terms of the technical team structure. We help them also identify what are the skills that are required. Like they needed to have developers, they needed to have a project manager, they needed to have, support team, etc., etc. So this was all done in consultation with the states. And once this was done, we signed an MOU with the state to initiate the capacity. And this is a picture of at that event. And this capacity build actually was not a short journey. It was actually a 2-year journey, both for us and for the state. So what we did was initially, we looked at what the capacities existed, and we also looked at what, and then we created a training sort of plan for the IT team. And once the training plan was created, we conducted several rounds over many months of technical training on the platform for the IT team. And we didn't stop there. After month 2, we actually continued to support. They would take on incrementally some of the activities, the technical work, and they would reach out to us and we would support them till we actually transitioned out over 2 years. And this is something that we take very seriously. That's just one example. But in this last, from 2019 onwards, we have done at least 20,000 hours of training for several such IT teams. We have put all of the learnings that we have gotten from all this training, enablement, helping states set up into playbooks and guides, which are all out there on our websites. We have, and all of our knowledge assets, everything is out there in the open. So this is just how all our documentation is open source. So as a result of this whole enablement exercise, so we did a pre and post of the skills that the IT team had. And in 2 years, what we were able to see was there was significant improvement in many of these areas. Like, for example, um, enable to bug fix, enable to do customizations, in being able to do new development. There were difference in how much the team was able to do each of these activities. And after 2 years, we sort of again went back and said, okay, we'll help you in some of these areas where, you know, the team needs more support. So this is sort of a 2-year journey that that particular team, and you know how far they had come in that 2 years. So these are just some pictures of these sessions that we do for this particular state. These are some training sessions, and this is actually the team that worked with us in this 2-year journey. Now, of course, we've learned a lot, and nothing is rosy. There are still miles to go. So some of the learnings that we have is that there is usually a lack of, while you know there is a lot of capacity in running programs, but having the capacity within states to run a digital enabled program, or how to integrate technology into the programs, that is something that is a challenge. And that's where we decided, you know, we have some playbooks on house where we help provide that support to states. We also, I mean, this is a common issue in India as well, where there is a lack of trained technical resources within the state governments. So we've simplified the platform so that it's very easy to learn and use. Retention of technical staff is a big challenge. And what we have started doing right now is we are setting up something called a Digit Academy. We do have a lot of material out there, which we are trying to make into a more structured learning format, so that every time new team members join the team, they are able to learn on their own. It's like a DIY sort of learning session. Right? And last but not least, I just want to play another video. This is the technical manager of the same state who's just going to talk about, you know, how she felt empowered during this process.
The best thing about a partnership with eGov is the best thing about a partnership with eGov is that they helped us to build our internal capacity. And have improved the expertise of our resources through new numerous enablements. The best thing about our partnership with eGov is that they helped us to build our internal capacity and have improved the expertise of our resources through numerous enablement sessions. We have almost reached a position where the state IT team is independently managed.
You do, right? Uh, so yeah, we'll share this if you're interested. We've shared a lot of these small booklets, all of our presentations. If you scan it, you'll get all of our presentations in there. And then I'll just hand it over to the next.
Thank you very much, Pradita. Very, very practical example of how things are working in the field. And I'm sure there might be some follow-up questions later. We'll come to that once we have our colleague Andrew shares his experience from Kenya on building capacity for effective health campaign digitalization. Welcome, Andrew.
Good afternoon. My name is Solomon Simba. I'm standing in for my colleague Andrew. And as the presentation comes up, I think I'll just cover the process that we took. I remember during the morning session, I was able to take us through the process and the journey that we have taken as a country to ensure that we have a more effective and efficient way of doing capacity building. Capacity building can be challenging. And most of the time you find that when you're doing campaigns, you have very limited resources to run your capacity building activity within that campaign. So what we have done as a country is to work closely with entities like Health Information System Program. That's not my presentation. Don't know what is happening. All right. So a small introduction of who we are and how we work with the Ministry of Health. So I'm Solomon Simba, part of the Health Information System Program, Kenyan chapter. And HISP is a global community of experts. So we work closely with the Ministry of Health. And in Kenya, as in the Kenyan context, we work closely with the Directorate of Digital Health, Informatics, Policy and Research. Within it, there is a division called Health Informatics. And those are the colleagues that we normally work closely to ensure that we strengthen and we continue to offer the necessary capacity building strategies that they can utilize as they offer their services and as they engage with the beneficiary within the sector. So my presentation is going to briefly just take us through the background, the journey we took to get into the capacity building through digitalization, the best practices, challenges we faced, and some lessons learned. And we are still learning, to be precise. So in any good campaign, there are some key things that you have to work with, and it's timeliness of how the campaign is going to be effectively done and the accuracy of data. So we normally, as much as possible, advocate for reference of routine reporting data to drive your campaign strategy. And that's why we are talking about you need to have access to accurate data. And for you to do that, sometimes that's the key principles for a successful campaign. So for us, we looked at when we looked at some of these campaign policies and strategies presented by our various programs, we realized the capacity building was not featured very much in terms of resource mobilization. So we decided as a sector to come up with a more ingenious ways of ensuring that we can have the common standardized or institutionalized curriculum sets for the Ministry of Health and have customized content depending on the requirements and needs of a certain campaign. And the only way you can able to do that and be able to sustain that process, you need to do it or run it through a digitized environment, right? So for us, most of our campaigns run through the DHIS2 instance, which we call it the Health Information System Kenyan instance. And we normally use the DHIS2 tracker module to customize some of those campaign strategies. We have gone even further to embed something called e-learning academy. And as a country, we have digitized most of the content, all the systems with the Ministry of Health being used currently. We have digital content for them. And we have even gone even further to ensure that our health workers can gain certificates which are digital. And those certificates can be presented to their various regulatory bodies as professionals and gain something called the CPD points, right? So you can be able to gain. So they're meaningful courses and they're self-paced. They're not programmed in terms of you have to do them in certain durations. You can do them when you have the time. But sometimes you normally have content pushed based on requirement, content pushed based on the campaign that you are running. So the way we have done it, we normally have start with the process of planning, right? So right now we have the standard curriculum, which is digitized. But when we have a new campaign, we normally internalize that campaign based on the point of planning. We have the strategy, and we check if there's any needs for new requirements in terms of tools, new requirements in terms of capacity building content, new requirements in terms of any resources that will be required. So obviously in a health environment, there's that common foundational curriculum that all health workers have to go through. But again, there are some campaigns that require specialized key professional tasks that needs to be taken by the officer before they can perform that particular campaign. So that's the background. So the journey we took, and remember, we realized that it was not going to be sustainable for us to be just waiting for every time you do a campaign, we target our health workers and we bring them in a classroom setup and train them. We knew that over time that resource wouldn't be available. So as a country, we work closely. In fact, the evolution of some of these things you're talking about are being done through the University of Nairobi, because we have a partnership for the Ministry of Health in the University of Nairobi, and as a School of Computing and Computer Science. So that the guys normally do the heavy lifting when it comes to digitization, right? So the government will just sit and propose, okay, we need this kind of a strategy. And we need to start thinking of a capacity building processes to be more effective so that we can push content to users. They can be able to interact with that content when they need it and still make that content effective. And the effectiveness of the content is to ensure that they don't just do courses for the sake of doing courses. They can earn points out of those courses. And to some level, we are even trying to ensure that even health workers can gain even promotions in their respective cadre as they earn the points to be able to dispense their services in a more effective and efficient way. So for us, one of the best practices that we did is to ensure that we engage all the stakeholders within the sector. It's not a very cheap process. Yes, the University of Nairobi can give us the technical know-how, but we need the resources. We need server resources. We need to be able to take care of the back-end colleagues in terms of being full-time. So we didn't want our back-end guys to be, when they're in school, there's one thing interact with us. No. So there's a dedicated team who normally do this as their day job, right? And we also have processes where we engage new blood into the industry, like running things like hackathons and boot camps, so they can jet in new innovations and stuff like that. So we have a very close network of coordination within the Ministry of Health, and that process is led and driven by the ministry, right? So the ministry takes the lead to call all the partners, and we have done a stakeholder mapping to ensure that we know where our partners are and what they are doing and which areas they're focusing and for what duration. So that by the time a partner time of support is ending, the ministry has already a plan to sustain that component that a certain partner was taking over, so that there's no break in terms of that framework. So we have a very clear, structured, stakeholder coordinated framework that we use. And that's the structure we use to coordinate partners at the national level, county level, all the way to the sub level and up to the facility level. So for us, the way we normally distribute or deliver our content is in this type of styles. They're not very new. So we normally have TOTs. We have 47 counties. So it's easy sometimes to do TOT of 47 persons as data managers. And those data managers can do TOTs of the various data managers within their sub-locations or sub-levels or sub-counties. So if there is a need, and sometimes these things normally arise, a curriculum for a certain campaign has to be done in person. So we don't call the entire group. We call the TOTs. Out of the TOTs, they're going to deliver the content to their groups so that the process of capacity building is cascaded downwards. And that has really helped us to save time. And we try to maintain the number of people we can engage per setting. So you have 47 counties, easy to manage 47 health record officer rather than having more than that number. It can be very cumbersome, and the content they want to deliver it may not be delivered as per capacity and per effectiveness we require. Some of the best practices is to ensure that we continue to do on-job training. That's why we have an e-learning academy. Our colleagues at the Ministry of Health can take their time, engage with the platform, get certificates and present those certificates and get CPD points from their various coordination regulatory bodies. We normally use other channels of communication. So all of our groups, we have groups using WhatsApp groups, and we use personal numbers, but that's just for passing the communication, not passing the content. So anything to do with campaigns is passed through the e-learning platform. But in terms of communication, because we have all our colleagues, we have done a database of the numbers, personal numbers, so you can able to quickly get rid of those who want to be interacted with in terms of a campaign planning, and we can tell them where they can able to get the resources and how they can get those resources for them to prepare for a campaign that will probably take in place in 2 weeks' time or a month's time. Just wind up on the pieces on virtual learning. I'm telling you, without the virtual academy, it could have been very challenging to cascade issues like community of practice for the COVID-19 management, because it was very difficult to meet face to face. So we used that platform to ensure that even our colleagues in various counties could access and could be able to manage cases of COVID in a more safer and effective manner. So for those who are able to join my class during the day sessions, that's the e-learning. I can see we have an e-learning SOP workshop. We have a very planned strategy. So every time there's a new campaign, we look at the content. If that content is going to be useful in future, we onboard it. So you digitize it. You make sure it is digitized and it's put part of the curriculum. So in the future, the same campaign has to be done or it has been updated. It's a matter of just updating the content rather than re-engineering again. So once the campaign is done, we never archive it. We document and we continue to improve it going forward. So some of the best practices to ensure that for this to happen, you have to have the goodwill from a national outfit. And for us, all these drives are driven by the Ministry of Health. Partners come in to plug and play based on the resources they have, plug and play based on the timelines of implementation and support. But one constant process, the process is entirely driven by the government, and the chair is the head of the directorate, who normally appoints the head of divisions on a need-to-need basis, but the chair is the one who drives the activity. So he knows if there are campaigns, what content needs to be done, the technical team are guided by the chair. So it's very important to ensure that government takes the lead rather than partners can plug in and play based on the resources that they have, right? So some of the challenges, it's not been easy because, again, remember, as a country, our environment is not in the cloud. It's running on a country-driven infrastructure. So you have data centers at the Ministry of Health, you have a data center at the University of Nairobi. We normally piggy bank data centers from the Ministry of ICT and others. So for us to be able to manage that, we needed to ensure we had a sustainable capacity building at the back end, because it's not easy to maintain technical people. The industry is, it's like a blue ocean, so people tend to move a lot. So what we did is to ensure that within the university, we have a curriculum of engaging new or even creating an environment of interest whereby we can showcase those who are currently doing pre-service or trainings in the institutions that there's opportunity within health or innovation. So we normally have hackathons and boot camps, which do not only target health record officers or medics, but we also look at other cadres like computer science, guys who are doing geospatial analysis, and the statisticians, right? So, because all those kind of cadres are required within health. So for us, and that could only be possible if we sustain that relationship from government-led ministry to a government-led public institution for them to drive the process. So lesson learned, digitalization is not cheap and it will never be cheap. So long as you go digital, be ready to cater for the migration, be ready to cater for capacity building. So one thing we realize within the health sector, the Ministry of Health, 80% or 90% or even 100%, the people who make decisions are doctors. But they are being informed by systems. So the systems are don't run by doctors, they're run by ICT, engineers, programmers, developers. So for you to sustain that, they have to also understand the business process of health. And it's not easy sometimes to sit down a technical person and start telling them our program once their campaign application customized, right? You have to compromise some things. You have to be able to say what can be done from a system perspective and what cannot be done, right? So for us, it has been a learning curve and we are still learning. We are still trying to see how we can onboard other public universities, because remember our health structure is devolved. So University of Nairobi is based in Nairobi, but they normally work closely with other universities at the county level. So there's a program that we call proximate universities. So counties which are near institutions which are within their locality, they can go there and get the same content. So our content is web-based. You go to elearning.health.go.ke, you find it there. You can see what you can able to do, and all health workers who are within the health information system Kenyan instance are also migrated in terms of access to the e-learning platform. You don't have to recreate your account again. So we have done that. One username, one access for all government facilities and government softwares. So for that will be my last presentation, and thank you.
Thank you very much. I'd like to thank both colleagues from eGov and Kenya for sharing this very, very practical experiences on capacity building. So now it's time for questions, for clarification questions to the presenters. So what we will be doing is that we'll take a few minutes to respond, to ask our colleagues to respond to any questions on their presentations. And then we will open it for an open discussion on capacity building, on what the way forward should look like. So we will have about 15 minutes altogether. And now it's open for questions.
Thank you. Thank you very much to both presenters. I actually have a really practical question, because I think both of you have presented that the capacity building requires you to go not just to the malaria program, but to other programs within the government. And oftentimes the funding sources are pretty disease specific. So, and even with pre-service education. So I'm wondering, from your standpoint, what are the opportunities that are there? How do C19 funds or RSSH funds possibly help in that? And what can we as donors do a better job of to be able to really support the whole ecosystem? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that question. I think in the context of Kenya, the way we normally look at it, because we have a joint coordination mechanism where all health programs are involved in terms of planning. So the point of resource mobilization, we normally leave it to the programs to lead the process. And once we have it, we normally do it's like a resource pooling. And why we're saying that, as from the Division of Health Informatics, we normally present that we have the capacity to customize. So we normally leave the element of programs to give us the content, even though it is not even digitized. We get the content as is, and then as we digitize it, we put in a digital module, and then we can be able to present, and they can be able to access. So the content comes from programs. So the programs take the lead in terms of requesting for resources to support their campaign needs and all that, as we can now use the opportunity to digitize and be able to ensure that content is available online.
Yeah, I mean, we are new to Africa, so, but just based on the limited learning that we are having in Mozambique, I think one thing that's really good there is, although we're working with the malaria program, but the malaria program is also is working closely with the information systems department within the Ministry of Health. And we are, along with our partners there, Chai, we are actually have a plan to build the capacity of the IT teams. So not only is the ability of the program, because the program ultimately runs the program. I mean, they are not specialists in information technology. And there are always some departments within the ministry, within the national governments, who are experts, or, you know, who are good at information technology. And we're working to building their capacity. And this is also, I mean, this is too early days, but I think the way our grants are structured is that capacity building is already baked into the grant. And that's the support that now we are able to provide the countries. So when we're building the capacity of the IT teams, it's not just to help a particular program, but now that they can start to help multiple programs at the same time. So we'll see how it goes, and we'll share more of our learnings next year in this forum.
Yeah, other questions?
Merci beaucoup. Ma question s'adresse à l'équipe kenyane. Lorsqu'il y a des changements ou il y a des paramètres au niveau des DHS2, est-ce que vous laissez ce travail au niveau de l'équipe de l'information sanitaire, ou bien c'est vous-même qui le faites?
It was meant for me. Yes. So if I got you right, you're just asking how we work with the health informatics team. As I mentioned earlier, we have a coordination mechanism that is driven by government to ensure all stakeholders who are doing anything within health are brought together. So we are part of that core team. So it's during those kind of sessions that programs sometimes bring up those requirements that the campaign coming on, they're planning to do, and they would like the content, which currently is either designed or in process of being designed, to be digitized. So we sit within the health informatics division, but the division cuts across, because we sit within the national coordination mechanism structure within the national government. So we're normally part of that process. So when a program has a new requirement, the health informatics, they're normally the first ones to be informed if there's a health informatics requirement in terms of system change or in terms of system customization. So they're normally involved in that. Those discussions normally arise when we have those kind of joint coordinated meetings. I believe I was able to capture that answer. Thank you.
Thank you. Another question for the presenters? Is there any question on the chat? Someone has access to the chat? Is there a question on the chat? No, okay. Great, thank you very much. So I think just to summarize, our colleague Pradita has presented a very, very important aspects of capacity building, emphasizing on on the need for those 4 stages that are very, very important in terms of strategy and institutionalization, programmatic readiness, technical capacity, and the capacity to innovate. My colleague's presentation from Kenya is also very complementary. Emphasize some of the aspects, including understanding that capacity building actually involves multiple stakeholders, but also requires a dedicated team to have in place. And some of their approaches included TOT and cascaded training, on-the-job training, using Learning Academy and virtual training opportunities that have started since the COVID era. So those are really very important aspects that they have highlighted. And of course, both of them highlighted that capacity building is not without challenge. And the predecessor said it's not always a rosy road. And Andrew actually mentioned that it could sometimes be expensive, which means that we have to properly plan for those things. But all in all, as part of strengthening our digitalization efforts, we have to keep always that capacity development and capacity building, and having sustainable capacity in place is a key and the central aspect of rolling out all digitalization activities in our programs. So I thank our presenters for the time and for the nice presentation, and a round of applause, please. Now, I'd like to take a few minutes if there are any reflections, to hear any reflections, any feedback from the House, particularly on how we can support the work of capacity building. So this is really an open session for anyone who would like to give their opinion. So this is not a question for presenters, but for any open comments for discussion. I'd like to just open the floor.
So I guess I'll break the ice here because it's a bit quiet in the room. But I guess when I listen to, for example, the DHIS2 presentation on capacity building, I'm still questioning where the exit strategy is, where the program itself can make the modifications it wants itself. Similarly, I actually would maybe pose a question to the Global Fund in terms of how you're funding in your grants. Does that actually lead to a focus on capacity building? Or, by putting money through, NGOs or whatever, it's, less risk, but it might not achieve the outcome over the long term. And I don't think capacity building is an overnight thing. I mean, it happens over time, it takes years. I mean, I look at where we are with AMP 20 years in. I mean, most of the programs are in excellent condition. They ask for some, pretty targeted support, but it's no longer what it was 20 years ago. So I guess my question to the room is, particularly to the programs, are you getting the capacity building that you need at this time for you to own your own systems and tweak your own systems? And if you aren't getting that, then what do we as partners need to do differently to get to the outcome that is ultimately all of our objective, which is that the programs are independently collecting, using, managing data for decision-making to improve programmatic outcomes. Thanks. Over.
Thank you, Marcy. That's an open question for everyone. Please feel free to chip in. I think my colleagues from the Global Fund could also add, just to highlight some of the things from our side, how we really think on strengthening the overall digital health strategies of countries, including campaign digitalization. We are very these are areas that we have been very much encouraging our partners and countries, national programs that we work with. And we understand that having the proper technology in place is very, very important. And it has to be something that is sustainable. And sustainability actually requires always having a strong plan for capacity building as part of that. And that should definitely be included on our funding requests, and we are always happy actually to include those in our grants. But I know that many partners are also very much involved and interested in this work. And ours is, of course, limited to the areas that we finance, which are the 3 diseases. But this is an area that I think every partner should definitely see how best to make technical support and capacity development an integral component of rolling out these new technologies as part of really strengthening and supporting our programs. Please, Guy.
Hi, I think I just wanted to say that in the last couple of months, as I spoke to a lot of countries from Africa, you know, capacity building was really top of the topics that we sort of discussed. So I think I can only, you know, and I'm thankful, Marcy, for you for raising that question, but I think it's the afternoon session, which is probably, you know, this quietness in the room. But definitely capacity building, I endorse that from the funding perspective and from the program perspective. I felt it was a key item, and I hope it continues to do so. And just to say that on eGov, at least just to make a point on Digit Academy, we offer Digit certifications, which anybody can get started to on. So if there are any IT people in this room, I just want to say that you can, you know, reach out to us, because that is the first step of Digit certification and the first step on capacity building. Thank you.
Hello. Anyone who would like to say the final word before going out for a tea break? Okay, so I think that's, yeah, it seems we're satisfied probably with some of those things that have already been presented. And yeah, I'd like to thank everyone for this interactive session. And we'll break for coffee. And according to the organizers, yes, we have to be back at 3:40. So that means we have about 10 minutes. Sorry. At 4, sorry. So we have half an hour. Yes, half an hour. Thank you very much.
just about 30 minutes just to wrap up and finish. I know we are all a bit tired, especially those who have been here for Monday. Just bear with us. So to continue the sessions, we want to just have a short presentation on the outcome of the group work that we did. So I'll ask my colleagues, Brad, Joshua, and Jendi or Elijah to please come and join me up here. Joshua, are you here? Elijah or Jendi? Joshua, if you are here, please kindly join me.
Sure, it's late on the last day, so I'll try to be pretty brief. But yeah, Robert and the team asked us to summarize a bit of the discussion from each of the group work from yesterday. So we tried through our notes, and I think there's more comprehensive notes if people are curious about, you know, a bit more deep. We tried to pull out some key themes, I think, that came out. So the first one being that countries are all at sort of different stages of digitizing campaigns and or integrating their service delivery, even in some cases around delivering multiple sort of interventions in the same campaign. So yeah, there's an example from DR Congo, which is aiming to create one digital platform to integrate several diseases, even if the campaigns themselves aren't integrated. There's a few shared strengths that we pulled out. So all the countries in our group, at least, which isn't everyone, but they had some goal or ministerial initiative to digitize their services, and all with some sort of aim, some of it having been realized or some of it still on paper, to do so in a less fragmented way. And a consensus, I think, amongst people that they felt that digitization had made the malaria campaigns better and somehow easier to manage from the groups of malaria programs and so on that we were speaking to. But that there were also a few challenges that seemed to be common, all of which there were some plans to address, again, at different stages of addressing them. So challenges of fragmentation of data systems and databases for interventions, which made integration of data use and systems management challenging. Linkage of campaign systems to routine systems, and then some challenges, I think, in every setting with internal coordination and MOH technical capacity to take such a more integrated approach. Go to the next slide on this. Oh, can you go to the, there we go. And so the other piece was that as the countries spoke about what their efforts were, it struck us that there were a variety of kind of different operational design goals with what they wanted to do with digitization. So the teams can say if these are slightly slightly off, but from the notes, sort of Ghana example, where they wanted to manage household registers and be able to see the coverage and uptake of different interventions at a household level. So to know this household has received, the children have received SMC, they've received X number of nets, et cetera, and be able to manage it from that more community angle. Priorities in Nigeria to micro-plan together with other programs and have better population denominator data. And in Tanzania, because of the operational design of, for example, the net resources, which are, as we heard about, I think on the first day, or maybe in the Monday and Tuesday, which maybe not all of us were in, their services are designed around things like school, continuous distribution via schools for bed nets, and then supplemental campaigns when coverage gets low. So a big priority there being to be able to link those two together so that you could see sort of total coverage between different modes of intervening. And then I guess through that, we just mentioned at the end to try to encourage country programs and those partners to share their sort of tool functionality, hopes and dreams with the different software and tech development colleagues in the room today, to be able to share what those looked like and try to help design together as a bit of a collaboration. And I guess I hope some of that happened in the morning, but it doesn't have to stop in that in this meeting, of course, and hopefully some of those relationships and discussions continue. Yeah, that's the summary from group one.
As you may have guessed, we're the capacity development group. So it's of course difficult to capture the richness of the conversation that we had over the course of the hour with one another the other day, but here are just a few pieces. As you may guess, one side of this is what's going well. One side of this is persistent challenges. There is clearly a bit of a relationship between the two. One, we observed that broadly there has been skilling across country contexts. So just in general, in terms of kind of the baseline of technological capacities that we find from place to place, we've seen an increase. We consider that to be a promising development for the enabling environment. The more we see alignment amongst partners and stakeholders around particular tools, particular solutions, particular approaches, the less duplication of effort is required to, say, train a person in one tool and then turn around and train that person or still other people in another tool, also promising. And increasingly, because we're seeing an appetite for digitalization beyond the campaign environment, we're seeing a greater investment in capacity development, in digitalization broadly, all promising indicators or trends. Oh, could we go back one, please? Thank you. In terms of some challenges, one of the observations is that we put quite a lot, or we place quite a lot at the feet of professional development. And there was sort of this persistent observation that more can be done at pre-service in universities and so on and so forth to ensure that folks are emerging with capabilities, with capacities in the types of approaches and tools that we are using in the space. At the same time, we're also observing that we are, in many places, generating more and more folks with technological skill, right? And yet, the health sector, our work does not necessarily seem to be connecting with that talent generation pipeline. A few more things here. We'll go quite quickly. You know what? I think we can move to the next slide. Thanks. So we didn't quite manage to cover all of the topics, but I want to note something here about maybe there are a few reflections on more immediate changes to our environment. Roughly, that's how we interpreted changes to systems or needs, immediate needs for future systems. Those include closing the gaps between health science and ICT when it comes to skilling, when it comes to capacity development. We also observed a need to increase our investment in complementary sectors. And finally, the stronger plans and policies we have around a digitalization agenda, the more able we are to create an environment in which we are broadly developing technological skill, technological capabilities that can be harnessed by the sector. And then in terms of the bright future, the sustainable future, a few things. One, there was an observation of an opportunity for governments to work more with local talent and for donors to be supportive of that talent pipeline. Additionally, we noticed that as we see, again, we kind of did this on the first slide, as we look at digitalization beyond campaigns, there is an opportunity also for greater investment in digital skills broadly. And finally, I thought this was a bit interesting here. I kind of added a little bit here. There is, as emerging from our dialogue, we recognize that there's an opportunity to take perhaps more of a mission approach and use a variety of tools, a variety of policy instruments to generate demand, to facilitate public-private partnerships, and broadly create that enabling environment for digital skills, digital capacity building. That's it from group one, or group four? What number were we? Anyway, that's great. That's it from capacity development. Cheers.
Thank you. Yeah, so for group three, we try as much as possible to summarize the ideas and we also try as much as possible not to dilute, some opinions. And I would also like to apologize to the team members that if in the course of super summarizing, your ideas got missing, we apologize. So we try to look at planning, budgeting, and tool selection for health campaign digitization. So the first item we looked at was what is working well. And here we noticed that there are a range of options of things that the team members believe are working well. So for those that say nothing is working well, we're sorry. We have seen a lot of things that are working well from others. So we have removed your ideas. So there are increasing technology options, which the team members believe are things that are working well. As we have seen today, we have a number of technology options presented, which are opportunities. There are also collaborative planning, involving all stakeholders, the government at the driver's seat, implementing partners and donors. There are also things that are working well. There are also issues around fundamental enablers in forms of developing or standardizing like barcode for ITN campaigns, which the team members also feel is something that is working well. So, and there are also increasing donors' commitment, around the campaign digitization. And lastly here, there are models that work well. There are a number of pilots that have promised very good results, which, are things that are working well. So on what are the remaining issues that need to be fixed? The first issue there was the issue of interoperability among the different tools. There are also issues of rollout cost and timelines. Others include there is no clear decision-making for or to enable countries that are just, are starting to digitize. There are also issues around ability to scale for those that have, piloted in a small scale, and they are expected to go, to a scale. And there are issues around national programs wanting their own, tools. Despite the wide range of tools, there are some national government that want to develop or want to design their own local tools, which we think are things that also need to be fixed from the group perspective. On what is needed to make planning decision-making easier. So the group members feel there is a need for clarity on the Ministry of Health long-term objectives and vision. And then they also feel there should be transparency in the cost, setting up and running cost of most of these tools. Some countries feel there are hidden charges for certain tools that will say they are free. And there is also need to develop standardized costing tools for having like a total cost of ownership. They feel a country that is about to digitize, they need to know what are the costs involved for the tools, for the infrastructures, for capacity building. They need to have like a broader picture of what is required right from the beginning. And there should also be availability of funding, especially to support the infrastructural setup. And then there should be clear evidence-based data solution for multiple programs. And then there should be technical guidance, by implementing partners and other bodies. On what are needed for functionalities for future systems that are currently lacking. In addition, to what they say is need to be fixed, there are also need for full traceability of supply chain components. So some members feel there is less focus on the supply chain digitization. Also, they feel issue of interoperability need to be fixed. there should be system to evaluate impact of digitization on campaign outcome. Not just focusing on the technology, fixing technical problems, but at the end, after digitizing, what has the digitization translate into impact in form of either increasing access or increasing coverage? And then there are also issues around functional payment system, and then how to identify and register households to avoid duplication. So on what are the current barriers for starting or scaling up campaign digitization? The group members feel there is weak government ownership and capacities, especially for countries that are starting. And there is no guidelines for tool selection in most countries. So, every developer will come, with the tools, and at the end, the countries get confused on which one, best suit their own context. There's also poor scoping of country digitization need to address specific challenges to foster campaign efficiencies. This is not my views. These are the views of the group members, and I hope I am able to do justice to your views. Thank you.
Thank you very much to the presenters and then to all participants for contributing to these group discussions. To wrap up, I think I'll call Mr. Himanshu from BNGF to come and give us a closing remarks.
Thank you, Robert. We should all be happy. We are only 15 minutes away, and then we'll thank everybody. Yeah, before I go there, just a quick introduction. I've met most of you, or a lot of you, yesterday. I'm Himanshu Nagpal. I'm the Deputy Director of Digital Health with the Malaria team at the Gates Foundation. I want to start by, you can say, why are you asking this question now? Why not 2 days ago? But I still want to give you my reason, and hopefully that will resonate. That's okay. I'll go. Hopefully that will resonate with a lot of you in the room. But why are we here the last 2 days, the last 4 days? Should I use a clicker? Okay. We all know this, the importance of bed nets in our fight against malaria. So again, all this data is known to everybody. I just want to do one math here. We as a community, malaria community, send out about 200 million bed nets every year. If you add up the cost of the bed nets and the cost of the distribution, we in total are spending about $1 billion collectively on this intervention. And hence, what AMP does and all of you do in this room is very important. We're trying to improve the efficiency of the system. What's wrong, or what may be improved in the system? There is evidence that we are very effective as a community in distributing these bed nets if we had to cover about half the country. So if you look at this chart, the slide will be shared, the source is at the bottom. But if you look at this chart, it's a comparison between, on the x-axis, nets per capita. So if a country has to cover its entire population, WHO recommendations by one net per 1.8 household, so at about 0.56 nets per person, you will cover the entire country. You keep going from zero upward at about half the coverage on the country. So the access to population is on the y-axis. So until you're trying to distribute nets for half of the country, you're doing it very efficiently. But it starts to plateau after that. What this data, end of the day, is saying is countries are buying enough nets to cover the entire population, get 100% access on the y-axis. But in most cases, we are only reaching about 75, 70%. So we're trying to optimize that last 20, 25%. There are two big questions here. Can we as a community malaria community in a resource constrained environment continue to do that for a long period of time. And second, from an equity perspective, from a fairness perspective, who are the last 20 to 25% of the population? Most likely the most remote, the most rural, people who have never seen a bed net in their life are being left out. Digitization is not new. Benefits of digitization are not new. Most of you in the room are pioneers, have done this for decades, not just in malaria, in a lot of different disease areas. What can still be improved in my view or in our view at the foundation are a few areas. The current approaches can change in terms of scope. We have talked about end-to-end approaches. What we mean by that is there are lots of digitization activity, which I often call as check the box. Funder shows up, says, we will only fund this campaign if it's digitized, and the implementer doesn't have time, the government doesn't have time, so they can do the least possible to say, yes, it's digitized. So we're leaving a lot of effectiveness on the table. We're not reusing assets across the campaigns. Again, these are themes which we have discussed over the last 2 days, and you all know, but I will still say them out loud. Integrated platforms across diseases. It's not sustainable. Malaria as a single disease, bed nets as a single intervention in malaria. We cannot sustain platforms built just for that campaign. Taking a platform approach, building the right tools, if we don't spread the cost across different health interventions, it's likely not going to be sustainable in the context we stand. The design, interoperability, I won't say anything more about it. The data that comes out of the system, are we truly able to use it? Are we using standards? Are we strengthening the infrastructure while we are building specific tools for our interventions? And last but not the least, the ownership. The government's having access to their own data on day one in real time, not 1 year later, not 6 months later. Lack of capacity, we just came out of such great discussion on that topic. There's a lot that can be done. There's a lot of digitization that is happening, but we are leaving a lot of effectiveness, a lot of accountability, a lot of sustainability, and a lot of government agency opportunity on the table. So I think we have gathered here and we have discussed a lot of things over the last 2 days on how do we go to the next level in this digitization journey. I've seen 2 things which have made me very optimistic around campaign digitization in the last 2 to 3 years. In fact, since COVID started. And I want to share those two thoughts. In fact, most of the things that were executed, and I will talk about a lot of players in the room have a role to play. I'll talk about what Benin did in 2020 and after that. And then I'll talk about some of the COVID work led by WHO and some of the other partners. So again, the pioneers of this work, NMCP, CRS, a lot of funders, a lot of other players are in the room. So I will not go through this in too much detail. But in my view, what Benin did in the middle of COVID, in terms of campaign digitization on bed nets, was an exemplar. Benin has showed us what's possible. There's still improvements to be done on that model, but this group has showed us what's possible and at least inspired me a lot in trying to advance this agenda. A group came together, they found 14% more population. The entire country was covered in a matter of 16 days in the middle of COVID. The campaign was originally, sorry, it's not going to the next one. Maybe I can just say next and you can advance it. So the campaign, the whole country was covered in 16 days. We got 94% geo-verified coverage. Before that, the KPI for the campaign digitization used to be, oh, we sent 10 million bed nets to a country And on paper, it says 95% were distributed at the right location, right? It was a world of faith. We shipped and they were distributed. Today, we know 94% coverage was achieved because somebody was tracked going to that household for enumeration and a BedNet distribution. And the technologies used here were neither AI, nor blockchain, nor big data. They were simple technologies put together in very practical ways to make things happen. The amazing thing on top of the country and the partners decided to reuse the platform, again for a different modality in malaria and then for NTDs. In some ways, that's where at the Gates Foundation, our aspiration to drive integrated campaign digitization vision actually started. So I want to thank that team again. There are lots to be improved in the Benin model also. I want to say there were significant delays in getting the data to the government and a few other things, but it's an exemplar which has motivated us and is continuing to push us to take the next step, both in Benin and rest of the continent. Two other key things I would show. Did campaign digitization lead to a positive impact in Benin? This is from the same paper, one of the supplementary tables, but essentially the blue line is the number of BedNets they were bought in the country. So when the blue line reaches all the way to the top, the country bought enough BedNets to cover every household. And the red line is the surveys telling us what was the true coverage. The last data point for Benin, which I have expanded, is from 2020. We were, in fact, through survey, able to validate that there was close to 95% actual coverage. In the past two rounds, every 3 years, BedNets are distributed. There were enough BedNets bought, but not enough coverage achieved. So I want to congratulate the team to help us see that this is real coverage. Very quickly on cost. A lot of questions have been asked around cost. Next slide, please, sorry. I just want to share this analysis that Tropical Health's team did on Benin campaign. I think this is the most robust. Again, a lot can be improved. A lot more research is needed. What was the true incremental cost of digitization of the BedNet campaign in Benin, including all the trainings for digitization, including the phones, including the additional supervisors? It came out to be about 17 cents per BedNet. About 4.5% of the cost of the BedNet campaign. So again, it's a baseline that we have to beat in all our future campaigns. Second, very briefly, COVID. The use of digitization has really accelerated in COVID. Use of telemedicine in some contexts, use of all sorts of digital modalities, but campaign digitization in the context of COVID vaccination has been my favorite. Next slide, please. Here I share an example from India. But behind that example, first I want to acknowledge, and my colleague from WHO Afro had this DDCC guidance on the slide yesterday, I believe. But WHO brought a group together to create a standard for what does a vaccine certificate need to look like so that it can be utilized not only within a country, but across countries. Within India, a system was developed. The vaccine certification system was also exported to 4 other countries: Indonesia, Jamaica, Philippines, Sri Lanka. The team eGov helped behind that. They're also in the room. It was integrated with ComCare in Jamaica, with DHIS2 in Sri Lanka, but it reached 2 billion certificates on that platform. WHO and all of these partners coming together when the need was really high was exemplar. And it actually scaled. So it's one of my favorite in addition to the Benin. So I just wanted to show these that it's possible if we all come together to solve this, we can take such an approach. Very briefly, some of you might call it some buzzwords, but I still want to rehash what's from a Gates Foundation perspective, what's our vision? We have funded a lot of different efforts. Some of them are even competing with each other. We are even responsible for sometimes the issues that you see in the countries. But what are we trying to achieve with all of you and with many other funders in the room? What are we collectively trying to achieve? Next slide, please. Again, I'm repeating some of the things you have already discussed. In our view, campaign digitization should be done in an integrated fashion, cross disease. I'm from the malaria team. All my funding comes from the malaria program at the Gates Foundation. But all that funding is going to integrated campaign digitization, not just for bed nets, not just for malaria, for all the diseases in a country. Country-owned, platform-based approach with a fit-for-purpose design. We're using a lot of tools which were never built to execute campaigns, to do campaigns. Impactful. Can we make sure we are not doing check the box and looking at all the pieces that need to be digitized for us to be reliably have accountability in the system and reliable data that we can make decisions on? Low cost design, which further improves the sustainability in addition to the integrated nature. And last but not the least, security and privacy at the center of the system. With that, I think we should take a moment to thank the organizers for the last 2 days. On the next slide, of course, team from AMP, Robert, Orion, Marcy, and everybody else behind them put this together, but also CRS, eGov, and Chai, who has been a thought partner and also helping them set up these last 2 days. So again, thank you everyone, and over to Robert, or Jason, over to you. Thank you.
Good. Thank you very much, Amiso. You certainly answered that question, why are we here? Look, I think you've actually done my job for me. I think you've closed the meeting very, very nicely, but I just wanted maybe to acknowledge specifically, if I could ask Elijah from CRS, Bradley from Chai, Nita and Pradita from eGov, and Robert to stand up. I just wanted to thank them specifically for their work in organizing this meeting. I'd like to give them a round of applause. Thank you very much. And then as well, I wanted to thank the interpreters at the back of the room. Thank you. I realize the technical staff, the staff of the Movenpick, and then a special thanks to the online participants who are with us today. And then just a few points. Oriane has already sent out the post-meeting survey, so if you can complete that, that helps us improve this meeting for next year, assuming we will do something like this next year. And then the PowerPoints from the last 2 days will be on the AMP website early next week. So thank you once again. And it's just one more special thanks to Robert, who did an enormous amount of work in pulling this together, Robert. And also to Oriane, who's at the back of the room. Thank you both. Thanks again.
I think people want more. Please, just as a reminder, the post-evaluation form has also been sent to your email, so kindly try to complete it for us so it can help us to improve on our meeting organization. Thank you.